So I know this is going to be shocking to all of our listeners, but this podcast doesn't pay the bills.
No. And if it did, we'd be doing one every day.
Well, and great news to all of our listeners. By the way, it's Mike and Josh with the Lucky 13 podcast, all things profit and people and profit. We haven't done this in a while.
It's been a little bit. We've had some things going on.
We have not been in lockup, so that's good news. No. But, this doesn't pay the bills. And so we've been out doing things that do pay the bills, and we have not made this a priority, but we're back at it.
I would add to it, I think where our families are right now, there are some bills to be paid with graduations.
Oh, my gosh.
And we had our last kindergarten graduation. Awesome.
Yeah, tell me about this. So let's catch up. We haven't talked on air here for a while.
They sang their ABCs and numbers just like the other 7 did. So that means the Westfield School Program is doing fantastic. Every kid has graduated kindergarten knowing their numbers and their letters. So that's a good thing. But no, we had a graduation, high school graduation, state track meets, college master's graduation. Son moved from Minot to San Antonio.
Can't imagine why someone would want to move from Minot, North Dakota to San Antonio,
Yeah, why
Texas.
not Minot is when you go in the winter, you'll understand why not. But just lots of things going on, all things amazing. And then just business here and then the EOS practice with all the clients.
Yeah.
The days we were trying to align, I apologize. I take a lot of responsibility for that.
Yeah, I do too.
Just not being able to find those full days, but no regrets because I'm working with some amazing people and they're all doing things, all people in profit all the time.
Yeah,
so
and they give us stories of things we can talk about. Yeah, it's been crazy world in the Lantz family too. We graduated Mason. I'll talk about Mason today. Mason graduated from college, from IU Business School. We're at the graduation. He may or may have had a few libations, and he says to us, "Hey, Mom and Dad, thanks for the greatest four-year vacation of my life."
Oh, well.
And we looked at each other going, wow.
I started to lip quiver like, thank you, and then you said, greatest vacation.
Greatest 4-year vacation of my life.
That sounds a little bit like those dollars were spent on the socialization as much as the education.
Yeah. But we then moved him. This was a great trip. We then moved him out to New York. And kind of funny story, we're on our way out. He and I are driving. My wife doesn't drive longer than 4 hours at a time. And so we know this about her. So we drove out on a Sunday. She flew out and we picked her up at the airport. So we're about halfway out there. And the whole plan was he had about a week time where he had to move into a temporary place where he gets his apartment. So we had this Jeep Wagoneer extended version packed to the brim. We don't own it. We rented it. And so
nothing parties like a rental.
We're halfway out there and he goes, "Oh, Dad, by the way, the plan was to take him to his temporary spot, unload everything, and then he was going to move himself into his other spot a week later." So we go there, and he says, "Oh, by the way, the temporary spot is a 6th-floor walk-up with no elevator."
Well,
so of course my problem-solving mode kicks in, and I'm like, "Well, I'm not walking all this crap up 6 floors." So we ended up keeping it in the car. Julie and I went to the Jersey Shore where everything is all cash.
Yes.
And then we came back up and helped him move in. So he is working for Stryker in
Way
sales. He's doing a great job. His territory is the Bronx. So he commutes 33 train stops every morning. And
getting some Yankee games in?
Yep, Yankee games, the whole thing. You took one in a couple weeks ago, too.
I got my first one. That was fun.
Yeah. Anyway, so lots of good things happen in the family. I'm sure we'll catch up more on some future episodes. So here's the thing. I know we're up to like 1 million listeners or something like that. So
I saw the second comment hit. It was amazing.
And the email just gets flooded. I mean, I have to hire somebody just to go through all the emails. And if you can't hear sarcasm
because of reading, or just because of the amount, or
sarcasm, I do have the IU degree.
Yeah,
so,
You color gooder.
All right. So we did get a question that came through, and I thought we could chat about this, and it flows into one of the topics we want to talk about. So basically, the question is, what is the right amount of future plans to consider when making a hire? As someone who likes to stay in high growth, rapidly changing companies, I'm always thinking about not only today's accountability chart, but what will it look like 6, 12, 18 months out? While I can't overhire every position and assume those people will automatically grow into bigger seats, I also don't want the entire team to be maxed out in their current seats. What are your experiences with filling some critical seats with someone who may be overqualified and or overpriced today, but will be capable of moving into a larger responsibility in the near future?
Wow. Well,
the good news is we have listeners that actually can write.
That is amazing. That means we do have non-IU listeners. On top of that, that is such an intense, deep question that is constantly trying to be solved. I mean, the thoughtfulness in that question and the mindset that would go into something like that is definitely going to be different for everybody, but I think we could probably take a shot at what we see from our side.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit about this kind of think, do, be kind of construct that you've been talking about, and I think that plays into this conversation as well. But let's start with like when you're working with your EOS clients or the way you think about things here at Invest and all of that, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so let's start with that think concept. So I'm not going to bash thinking. I think thinking is wonderful. It's the type of thinking we're doing. And so when I say think, I want us to think about that we're in this linear path of, one foot in front of the other. But when I use thinking, I talk about that is an anchored past decision-making process. And so many companies that are anchored to the past, we used to do it this way, why don't we continue to do it this way? Or live in the shoulda, woulda, coulda state. I call them my MapQuest people, which means that if you remember MapQuest, you print out that 13-page document, and then on page 7, you made a wrong turn, and you end up in Albuquerque.
Bro, I was a State Farm Atlas kid.
Oh, look
I
at
was
you.
the one riding shotgun with my dad,
There you
telling
go.
him where to turn.
A State Farm Atlas, what a reference.
Yeah.
But you see what I'm saying? When you're on that plan, that straight line linear path, to answer that question on what you're going to do to hire, you're going to base it off the mistake you made in the past rather than the lesson you've learned.
Yeah,
and so I call that being stuck in your think state, and that you're constantly in this, what happened to me in the past is what's going to happen. The past is a place of reference, not of residence. I find my thinkers are residing in their past. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
So I'm dancing around to get to that answer. I want to move to the do state. The do state is this exponential growth. By the way, the think companies are going to be gone. They will get gobbled up, eaten up, or getting forgotten.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to
And
you?
they probably already are.
They
just don't have,
Or
they
in
don't
the
realize
process.
it. It's Encyclopedia Britannica, it's Polaroid,
Great
it's,
reference.
Those types of
Great
companies that
reference.
didn't even realize it.
Yes. So when I moved to the do state, I use MapQuest, I use Encyclopedia. I can't even say the word, so it's not. I want us to think about moving to ways. So when we move to the do state, we're in our present self, meaning that we're going to outwork, outlove at this point. And I find most of my companies live in that outwork, outlove. They miss the out strategy. When I talk about that, they are using data as real-time analytics, and they're analyzing the data, a little bit lagging, but they're using that data to project their next moves.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So they're constantly leveraging, what can I do next? And there's nothing wrong with that. That is a great growth pattern. But what I hear this question framing is it really moves to this be state. And when you answer that question, who do you want to be? Well, you got to now address that. I have to actually identify what I want to be 3 years from now, 1 year from now, 90 days from now. As I mentioned in the question, what does my accountability chart look like? Are we taking the time to write that out? And then there's steps that go in besides that. But let's start with just thinking about quit living in the MapQuest, quit living in the ways, and start just being a compass, if you will. I'm going to use Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Ready for that? Where he's going, there are no roads. Just get to 1.21 gigawatts and 88 miles an hour in a DeLorean, and next thing you know, you can be wherever you want.
Yeah.
That's the B state that we want companies to think about. And now they're not out working, out loving. Now they're out strategizing. And so when we put that together, now we can take that accountability chart and start putting some actual real things inside that. I'm cautious I say the word things. I want to break that down. But just to give us a framework of how I think about that question, it really is, let's not think about it. Let's not do it. Let's get to the point. I'm going to change that word thinking to the B state. Let's get to our B state and then work backwards. Does that help?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think the question is a really insightful question, I believe. And I think but it's very, very difficult for fast growth companies. That was one of the things that he talked about in this question, because you're the guy that you need or the gal that you need as a CFO today is probably not, if you're growing, let's say 100%, over 50 to 100% year over year, it's probably not the same person that you need. Well, the skill sets aren't the same that you need next year. And then if you look out at your 3-year picture, as you guys talk about it in the EOS framework, whether you're on EOS or something else, but you look at it in the future, then the CFO skill set that you have today is probably not the same skill sets you'll need 3 years from now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. And so that is always a very, very difficult thing to do, because you're not only are you predicting how the company is going to be in the future and what skill sets you need, you're then now evaluating who you've got in that seat and whether or not they can grow that fast.
Correct. A couple things from the question from what you said. I want to make sure that I address the fact that he talked about what do I do with my current folks.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about that right now, but we have to think about the overload of those folks as you get to that point.
Yeah.
But if you're hiring somebody for the job you need today and you're not aware and adapting to what you're going to be in the future, you're actually going to run through that person, or that seat's no longer going to exist because you've outlived it.
Yeah.
And so the awareness of you said this so perfectly. You said right people, right?
Yeah.
That has to be first and foremost. You have to qualify the kind of person you want. So in this particular instance, it sounds like you need to have somebody who's willing to grow with you and will aware and adapt along the path, because as he talked about, they're a fast growing company. They're accelerating. And you got to have people who are willing to accelerate, because if you get somebody who gets to their think state early and you're accelerating your B state, they're going to get stuck. The second part of that is you said it so clearly. What is the seat you need today, but what have you designed for it for the future? And you got to have those two where you can see, because I want to be a part of something that's going to grow that I can grow into. Now, I'll be malleable and I want everybody in the organization to be, but if you haven't clearly outlined, this is where we're going, but this is the job at hand. The seat matters first. You build the seat and then you hire to that seat.
100%.
So important. But as you build that seat, are you building the 3-year seat at the same time where you see where it can grow into? It won't 100% align with that, but it gives that pathway, it gives that direction, and it also helps in your choice making of the kind of person that can go from, I'm an A today, but I'm going to be, a Z later because I've grown through that path.
Yeah. So a big gap that I've seen as we work with clients is, let's say I'm an entrepreneur. I've grown this business over the past 20 years. I've grown it from nothing to 20 million, and I want to be at 100 million in the next 5. My experiences has been that entrepreneur that has that $20 million business that wants to grow to 100 has no clue what a quote unquote CFO or a VP of sales or a chief HR officer, whatever it may be, needs to be at 100 million.
Correct.
And so one of the pieces of advice I always give is go find somebody where their past is your future. So for example, there's a gentleman that I'm great friends with. He was our CFO at Defenders. He was our CFO starting at 50 million and probably even less than that, and helped grow it to 750 million before he left. And so a lot of times I'll contact him and have him meet with a CFO, a potential inside of a company, and say to him, Bart, tell me, is this somebody that you think could be a CFO at a $100 million company? And get a read, because Bart already knows what that looks like. And usually the entrepreneur, the owner of the business, they think they have a clue, but they really don't have a clue of what it really requires to be a CFO of a $100 million business rather than a $20 million business.
I love it. I wrote this down. I forget where I was at, and it wasn't said this exact way, so I'm paraphrasing. You're going to pay for wisdom. You got 2 choices to pay for wisdom. You can pay for it by stumbling, fumbling, bumbling from 20 million to 100 million by running through a bunch of people and make a bunch of mistakes. Or I can pay for wisdom to go out and either hire that wisdom or go seek somebody who actually has it and then leverage that for the future. And so you're going to pay for it one way or the other. Now, some people just want to pay for it through, blood, sweat, and tears. I love it. That's awesome. Let's get a strategy to do so. What you just described is I'm going to pay for it by leveraging relationships that have been there and then actually leveraging them as part of my insight to the next person.
Yeah.
So wisdom has to be sought. You have to be curious, but then you have to be willing to have that 20 seconds of courage and 5 minutes of awkward to go say, I need to borrow it because I don't have it.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we think about it, let's just think about it in the EOS construct. We're building a 90-day plan. We're building a 1-year plan. We're building a 3-year plan, and we're building a 10-year plan. I personally like to adjust the 10-year to 7-year, but that's just me, because 10-year I can't even think about 10 years out, right? But however, whatever your timelines are, right, and whether you're using EOS or something else, I think what is a really helpful way to think about this is you start with the 10 or the 7. Then you're going to the 3, and then you're going to the 1, and then you're going to the 90 days, and building out an accountability chart for each of those time slots.
Yes.
And I don't know that experience, that exercise is done as a full group. I think that exercise is best done, especially when you're talking about the 3-year or the 7 or 10-year, is best done with the owners of the business, potentially some trusted advisors, potentially that sort of thing. And so I think that's an important thing to do. So for example, someone could go take a clarity break, like go take today.
First of all, call that out. You got to go take those clarity breaks.
Go take a clarity break. And maybe one of your topics of a clarity break is, what does my accountability chart look like 3 years from now? And it's very possible that nobody that's on your executive team today is a part of that. Is on the accountability
That's a hard conversation to have, but it's real. I will call them my healthiest growing companies. I got a lot of fast growing companies. My healthiest growing companies have a 3-year accountability chart, and it's in 2 colors. It's in what we have today and what we're going to need to be. And a lot of those seats that they need to be are still open. But as they start to list those out, they have done such a wonderful job of not putting names in there.
Yeah.
They have prioritized their future hires. They prioritize the dollar figures they need. They even put dates to it that we feel like, from what we know today, because at the end of the day, we're solving problems with the information we have today. Information will adjust. What we know today, that's number 1, that's number 2, that's number 3, which ties a little bit back into that second half of that question, because of the awareness they have of the overload that's going on with their company today, because they got some people that they see. But if you're not, what you just described, having that clarity break and then not everybody, but your team is clearly sitting out and saying 3 years from now, guys, we're a $20 million company with 50 employees. We're going to be at 80 employees at 100 million, but it's not going to look, the accountability chart just isn't adding 30 new boxes. Everything on this chart is going to change, and we need to look at what the CFO today looks like this, but that's what it's going to look like 3 years from now.
Yeah.
Having that vision, I described it as if you know you need to go get a muffler because you're hearing it on your car, all of a sudden you're going to see all the muffler shops you've been driving by.
Yeah.
When you write that 3-year accountability chart and you're prioritizing, all of a sudden your head, your subconscious is going to say, I'm going to start looking for those folks. Then you're going to run into the question of, do I hire them too early or too late? Well, that's where you got to leverage that wisdom that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And you got to have a little bit of gut and a little bit of feel, know your cash flow, know your
Gotta
profitability.
be able to afford it.
Yes,
You know,
all those things are real.
Yeah.
But just by having it, I love you called it clarity breaks, writing it down and going through that exercise that you have it someplace and you look at it. It's a living document. And then that your team's aware of where you're going as well. Then everybody's on tune with priorities 1, 2, and 3 hires, and this is the dates we're looking for. And then everybody's now looking for those person, but then you're going to dial in that this is the right person for the right time. And if life changes, information changes, then you change your accountability chart along with it.
Yeah.
It's not a set in stone.
Yeah. So a little pro tip maybe, I think, that helps with those because I've been involved in a lot of those conversations where the owner has to go to, I'm using the CFO as an example. The owner makes this person in their organization the chief financial officer because they're the most senior financial person in the organization. Then what happens is that over time, the owner realizes they're a great person. I want them a part of this team, but they're not a CFO. They're maybe more of a controller. And so then they have to go and they have to tell the person, hey, your job's not going to change, but we are going to bring somebody in over the top of you. And because I've given you the CFO title, I now have to take it back and give you a controller title, let's say, or SVP of accounting or whatever it is, and bring the CFO in over you. And that creates a really bad experience.
Egos are hard.
So my recommendation to organizations is hand out titles based on the job that needs to be done, not on if you're the most senior whatever in an organization. So don't give somebody the VP of sales title if they're really not VP of sales level for your organization. There's a lot of other titles you can come up with because titles matter to people, whether we want to believe it or not. Titles used to matter to me. They don't matter to me as much anymore, but I also own my own business. So, but they matter to people. And when you have to then move them backwards, even you're sitting here justifying, but we're a much bigger company. So a controller at our company is, like a CFO at a smaller company. It doesn't matter. People don't want to take that step backwards.
Yeah, I find companies use titles for one of two things. Either as an attraction point so that somebody feels elevated, or as a street cred. Yeah. Like I need to be VP of sales because if I'm in the room and I don't have that 100%. Title, they're not letting me in the room. I get that. But internally, you have to know that title is not what's important. It's the function and the seat. Exactly. So what is the function we're getting done? So I'm answering this question differently that I don't believe titles and functions are the same thing.
I totally agree.
And so,
but they need to be.
Internally, make sure that everybody understands the function. Yeah. If you need to use the title for outside street cred, great. If you need to use the title for attraction, great. But whatever you do, right, whatever somebody comes to you on is what they're going to leave you on. Yeah. And so if they come to you based off a title and then you got to change that title because somebody's elevated on them, then they're going to leave you on that. And you have to keep high awareness that I wrote a 3-year resume for an XYZ person, and they're not going to meet that 3-year resume. Yeah. I need that 3-year resume filled for the greater good of the company. Yeah. I have to go find that person.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, the answer to the question really is insightful from the person that wrote this in. Oh, create your 1 year or accountability chart, your 3-year, your 5-year, your 7-year, whatever you want to do. Get crystal clear with the function that you want done at those different thresholds. Love it. Based on the size of the company, not based on the size you are today, but based on how it's going to be in the future. And then as you're going through, as you're out in the marketplace, always be on the lookout for people that can fill that function for you at some point in the future. And even if you can't hire them today, there are a litany of people that I've hired in my career where I spent 2, 3, 4 years courting them, keeping them warm, that sort of thing, knowing that eventually we were going to want to hire that person. But it's no different than business development or sales.
Correct.
It's finding really good people and then stay in touch with them and then, pulling the trigger when you're ready for it.
This is going to hurt my mouth to say it, but there's a reason why Tom Brady sat behind Bledsoe for a while.
Yeah.
right? And that wasn't training him. That was coach developing,
Yeah.
mentoring him. And sometimes you got to coach, mentor, and develop while they're not in your organization. So when the time comes, you can pluck them.
Yeah.
I want to add one more thing. I don't want you to forget that seeking somebody of the job that you're going to want to have 3 years from now, that you know somebody who's done that, can give you such insight and such wisdom into your hiring process. That was such a good call out.
Yeah, and likely a lot of these owners already have those people, because I find people build advisory boards and things like that based on function. I'm going to have somebody on my advisory board that was a CFO.
Yep.
Just including those types of people into their selection process is an important piece.
100%.
Awesome.
100%.
Well, it's great to be back.
Good seeing you.
And we'll talk soon.